All right, next up we've got Jason Clodfelter, who works for Forsyth County. He's also a fellow member of the Appalachian State GIS Mafia. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, well, good morning. I want to share with you a project that we've been working on in Forsyth County for the last year and a half or 2 years or so. Just kind of take you through the history and what we've done, the methodology, but why we even started it, and then kind of how it has transitioned and morphed into something else. So just tell you a little bit about our office, what is Map Forsyth, again the project history, our methodology, results, and then just share with you some lessons learned. There we go. And for those who may not be familiar with Forsyth County, here we are, population-wise, we're the fourth largest in the state. We're about an hour and a half or so to the west of downtown Raleigh, about an hour north of Charlotte. And we've got 10, I think, municipalities that are either completely or partially within the county boundaries. So who or what is this Map Forsyth thing? Well, we're simply just a enterprise GIS office that was started in, I believe, August of 2011 as a result of a GIS needs and strategic implementation plan that was undertaken by the city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. That started in 2009. One thing that's important to note that prior to that study being undertaken, and still currently now, there are lots of GIS folks in the different departments and agencies across county and in city government. But our office is kind of charged with pulling things together, centralized data repository, overseeing large projects, planometrics, addressing different things such as that. And we get to help, what we've really been doing is getting to help a lot of other departments that have not had exposure to GIS in the past. So this particular distressed area project, and for us, what we mean by distressed area is really a term that our county manager kind of came up with, and it's more of a socioeconomic distress. And it's not something that we set out to do initially. It was not the brainchild of myself or anybody else in our office. With us being a new department, we spent a lot of time going out to the various departments and agencies, just telling them who we were, what we did, and in a lot of cases explaining to them what GIS was. And as a result of that, we started getting data from various departments like, hey, can you guys map this out? Can you map this out? Maybe we can see our data in a different light. No problem. As we started doing that, we started seeing some different trends with some of the data. About the same time, the tax assessor had approached us, was looking at the possibility of shortening the time frame that the county took to start the tax foreclosure process of properties that were in delinquency. I think typically in the past it's been about 4 years or so that properties may be in delinquency before the county would start the process, which could take another 18 months to 2 years. His thought was during that time, if the property is either in the hands of somebody that doesn't care about it, or they can't do much about it, or perhaps even in abandonment, what other type of governmental expenditures are going on with those properties? Sanitation, other crime, or different things like that. So we started trying to acquire some data to start looking at that. But then the real big one that jumped us off was our tax revaluation that went into effect in 2013. So what we're looking at now, the county divided into our tax appraisal neighborhoods. And the thing to point out that kind of jumps out is this area kind of in the center here of the county, these dark shades of blue. These neighborhoods in the darkest shade of blue are neighborhoods whose assessed value dropped 50% or more from over the previous revaluation, which is only 4 years prior. We did a 4-year cycle in Forsyth County. So, and then the next lighter shade of blue is 35% or more. So you can see we had a significant area of people that were concerned. Obviously, people don't want to pay too much taxes, right? But they don't want their property values decreasing either, especially in those amounts. If we look at this in a little bit different light, the gray parts that you see are commercial neighborhoods. We took those out of the equation and looked strictly at residential. The areas that we saw on the previous map that lost so much in value are also areas of some of our lower assessed properties. Those dark blue there are properties that the median assessed value is less than $50,000. So the tax office started having a little bit of a battle on its hands. As a lot of the property owners in these areas they're pretty upset about things. So we were then approached by the county manager that said, hey guys, is there anything that you guys can do to look into this area to see what may be going on that's causing potentially some of these property values to decrease that the tax office saw. Obviously the tax office can't look at anything but the sales by statute. So we told the county manager, yes, we'll be glad to look at some stuff. As a matter of fact, we have some things that we want to show you anyway. So we were struggling with how to take some data that we had already to management, and he actually came to us and opened the door, so that was a good thing. The county manager helped us set up a meeting initially with himself, a couple of the assistant city managers from the city of Winston-Salem. I think our tax assessor was in the initial meeting. City county planning director was in the initial meeting as well. And we simply just presented to them some of the data that we already had in relation to that change in value from the revaluation. So some of the data that you see that we had, certain social services programs, select crime, just for the city of Winston-Salem only at this time, delinquent real property, bank foreclosures, and then we just threw on and looked at a few variables from the census data. I want to point out to you that the data that we had locally was all either address specific or already had a verified XY coordinate on the ground from our crime stuff. So we were able to get pinpoint down all the way to the address level. So some couple of things that we showed them initially. In the background here, again, is our median assessed value by the tax neighborhood. So again, we see in this area those neighborhoods that were less than 50,000. And then over top of that, we have median household income from the 2010 census. And the blue census tracts that we're showing here are areas where the median household income was less than 35,000. So you can kind of start to see some correlation. The red over here are areas where the median household income is 85,000 or more. If you look at the percentage of families in poverty, again, the same base map in the background, the census tracts in red are showing 40% or more of the families that live in those areas are in poverty. The orange was 20 to 40%. And then we started looking at some of the local data. Again, very basic GIS stuff. All the little orange dots on the map represent one location for some of these variables. In this case, we're looking at child Medicaid recipients with children under 19. Again, overlabeled to those areas where they have the change in value. So we can see that we have occurrences all throughout the county, but you can start to see this picture developing here. Child Medicaid recipients, we look at another variable. These were food stamp recipients at the time. And then looking at delinquent real property. So we went through this with all the variables that we had at the time and in this initial meeting. And then as a result of that, the management asked us, all right, this is good stuff, you're giving us good information, but we need more and we need to make sure we're encompassing everybody. So they asked us to expand the data to include all our jurisdictions in the county, especially the crime data and that type of thing, and code violations. Kind of run through this whole scenario with all the variables that we had came up with, and then report back to them, and just give us the top 5 or 10 most distressed areas in the county was our charge. So for our initial study, these were the 20 variables that we had, that we used. And again, this covered the entirety of the county and the municipalities. We have the 5 different social services variables on the left. We had 5 different property variables. You see that down here, code violations, we had some of those aggregated together. Those are things like housing violations, weeds, trash, overgrown lots, that type of thing. We just kind of aggregated it all together. And then we had 2 different crime variables that we looked at. Our study period ended up being a 3-year period of 2010 to 2012. We really wanted to go back and get that same 4 years that the tax office had for their reevaluation. But as we started acquiring the data across the board, we found that some of the data was just not consistent. It was not there in 2009. So we didn't have a good confidence in using that information. So we decided just to not use 2009 and we'll start with 2010 and move forward. Excuse me. So we had a 3-year study period. And as you can see from the maps a while ago, we simply created a point feature class for all of these variables. Then we used that, took it into using kernel density, creating the hotspot, if you will. You can see our parameters there. So again, if we look at some of the variables that we had, we'll go back and just kind of re-examine some of these. So in the follow-up meeting with management, we then went through our whole variables and showed them something like this. Again, we're looking at the density of the child Medicaid recipients, with the darkest orange, red areas being the highest concentration. The food stamps. And then looking at the delinquent real property. Now, we're just showing you 3 variables here, but I'm sure as you guys are very used to using GIS and that kind of thing, you're starting to see a familiar pattern. And this played out all across the board with our variables. But we wanted to find out more conclusively of trying to identify these distressed areas. It was hard to look at each one individually. We could see certain similarities, but we wanted to be more conclusive in what we took back to management. So we ended up creating a polygon feature class around all those areas of moderate to higher densities. We're primarily an Esri shop, so we just did the union overlay feature in ArcGIS. And we kept all the variables equal with their weighting. We didn't try to do any weights with any crime or anything like that at this point. We kept everything even. So just an illustration of that. Again, looking at the delinquent real property. The black polygon you see around there is how we created the polygons for each of those features with the moderate to higher density. And once we overlaid those 20 variables together, these concentrated areas, we ended up with this. A couple of things to point out. The area in the center, the red, that's where we had 16 of our 20 variables all concentrated in that one area right there. So it kind of painted a pretty big picture. And if you think back to what we were tasked to do by management, to come back and report them in the top 5 or 10 most distressed areas, well, for us, even though things are occurring throughout the county, we didn't have 5 or 10 main areas or areas. We had one major one, and then another one to the southeast that's starting to show up and show some indications. So obviously we want to dig into these areas a little bit deeper. We simply created polygons based on those density areas. Took them into Esri Community Analyst to get some demographics out. And so the pinkish column here is equal to our red on the previous map of our 16 variables concentrated together. The orange is where the surrounding area where we had 11 to 14 of our variables concentrated. And so if you look at certain things, I mean, we're looking at a small area, just a little over a half a square mile. Population not that great, but then you start getting into the interesting numbers. The change in population from 2000 to 2010, we had a decrease of almost 2.5%. We compare that to the county as a whole of an increase of over 14.5%. Median age of 30. County average median age is 37.2. And then some of the real disturbing numbers. The age group with the highest population in those areas are 0 to 4-year-olds. The youngest of the young, the most vulnerable, if you will. Median household income less than $14,000 compared to over $46,000 at the county, and the per capita income only $9,300 as compared to over $26,000 to the county as a whole. Have a huge or a much higher percentage of our housing units that are renter occupied. Over 80% are renter occupied versus owner occupied in our most distressed area versus 36% in the county. And then if you look at some of the race breakdown, over 88% of the population in our most distressed area is African American. So we started, again, just painting this picture. Another thing that we looked at, just to make sure we were covering all of our bases, we wanted to know ourselves, were these variables that we were looking at, when they were mapped out, were these things occurring statistically random, or are they statistically clustered together like they appear to be? And so when we ran the average nearest neighbor on our 20 variables, the main thing to look at is this last column, the p-value. You can see that homicide was our only variable that appeared to be statistically random. Everything else was clustered together, so other factors are at play. I will point out, part of this is perhaps due to the smaller number over this time period. We had a 3-year time period. We had, I think, 31 homicides during that time period, as compared to several thousand of some of these other variables. And looking at the data since then going forward, that is no longer going to be the case. It's going to show up as clustered as well. A couple other things we took into account. We wanted to look at these the variables and to look and see how often they occurred in some of our lower value properties. So again, this blue column are neighborhoods with the median assessed value less than 50,000. The green less than 100,000, which obviously would include this one. And just some things to point out: delinquent property very high, especially less than 100,000, got over 63%. Nearly half of all burglaries, half of all of our foreclosures, half of all of our copper theft, yeah, that's a separate category, oddly enough, are occurring in some of these areas. Sanitation liens, very high numbers. A lot of our housing and other code violations, over 80%, in some of the neighborhoods less than 100,000. So again, just trying to show the management what we can do with GIS, because we're still trying to sell ourselves as well through this whole process, but also letting them know what's going on in the community. Well, that's great. Created all these pretty maps, we created all these charts and graphs, but we're just GIS and we can't go out and fix the problem, right? So we got to get the information to the groups that maybe can help to start looking at these and trying to solve some of the issues. So obviously we talked about, we shared it with city and county management. Our county manager then instructed us to go to a department head meeting and share this with all the county department heads to make them aware. Because if you remember back, I talked about we've got GIS and different groups working kind of on their own over all these years. And what we showed them when we started showing department heads in these groups was not a surprise to anyone, because they're like, yeah, that's where my guys go all the time. Yeah, that's where my guys go all the time. But what was surprising was that they didn't know it was encompassing all across the board. The manager, very involved in the community, pushed us out into the community. We presented at the United Way to their executive board, which then led us to present to their full board and other partner agencies. They've utilized some of this information in some of their their place-based initiatives, neighborhood programs. We shared the information with the Housing Authority with the City of Winston-Salem. They actually utilized this in part of a grant that they were applying for from HUD, which they were one of only 9 communities in the country to receive a $500,000 grant for their Choice Neighborhoods planning. We've been fortunate enough to share the information with Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, which has led to opening up doors for us to do some mapping for those folks as well. Some community outreach and education things that they are interested in doing. There's a group at Wake Forest University School of Medicine. It's their Translational Science Institute, and they're actually looking at gun violence as a health disparity. So they saw our information, and then we were able to work with them. The City of Winston-Salem Police Department, we got 10 years worth of gun violence data from the City of Winston-Salem, mapped it out as a whole, mapped it out by race, breakdown, things like that. Surprise, surprise, same areas of concentration. And then a couple other groups locally, Forsyth Futures, the local nonprofit, and then an interesting one here at the bottom is Hope of Winston-Salem. And HOPE stands for Help Our People Eat. And this is actually like a faith-based organization that takes food trucks out into the community to provide fresh, healthy meals it's mainly focused for children, and they do it on Sundays when most of our other food assistance programs and pantries and stuff are closed. So they've utilized this information plus some other work that we've done. They've actually gone out and created a little mobile GIS type app as well for this and for some of the population to utilize to see where they can come and get these meals at. So initially we had the meeting, we did all the work, we presented it to management, we thought we were done. It's like, get the project done, check it off, move on to the next project. That has not happened. It has turned into a program now. So we went ahead and got the 2013 data, incorporated that into the issue. We increased our data set. We got after showing this to some of the department heads and stuff, public health guys, especially epidemiology group, said, can you help us out? They gave us 4 or 5 years worth of data. You can see cancer, heart disease, stroke-related, diabetes-related deaths, and infant mortality. We put those into the equation. Some of the aggregated variables that we had, particularly the code violation, we pulled some of those out individually just to see if it would make a difference. It has not. But if you think back a moment, this was our map from our initial results, right? After we throw in the 2013 data, if we hold our classification steady, then our distress area looks like this. It looks like it enlarges. But since we now have gone from 20 to 26 data sets, if we let this classification fall in more than natural breaks, then it looks a little bit like this. The most distressed area in here, a little bit smaller, but this is an area where 20 or more of the 26 variables are concentrated at. So, as we move forward, we want to do some asset mapping in these areas to see what is there on the ground, civic organizations, churches, things like that, recreation centers or whatever that may be in the area that can be utilized not only for the government but also for a lot of the nonprofits and community organizations to kind of launch some efforts from. Obviously, we're going to continue mapping the variables individually, monitor movement, continue mapping the concentrations and monitoring changes there. And then a tricky one is we want to map the investments that are going into these areas from housing, from United Way and those groups, and see what effect this may have on these areas over time. And obviously, it's going to be a little more difficult to do this. We'll see how it pans out, and this is going to be a long duration. We won't be able to tell anything for at least probably 5 years or so. And then as a result of getting the health data and knowing the area of some of the housing things in the built environment in our more distressed area, we want to start digging into a little bit more to some of the correlations between those. If you look at the structure age, the construction, the lead paint, the asbestos, that type of thing, and how that is relating to things like infant mortality and cancer in particular. So we're interested in doing that, and then taking it out of the desktop ArcGIS platform. Best way to try to get this in a mobile web solution, looking at the various different ArcGIS online, whether we do a story map type of thing, whether we just do an application. So we're looking into all those type of things. Things that we have learned, if you didn't already know this, having a GIS champion is crucial to every project, certainly one like this. And it doesn't hurt at all if your manager is your champion. So it's been a huge benefit to us to have our county manager and our county housing director in particular that have been our two champions who really pushed us and gotten us in front of a lot of folks in the community. I will say that as a result of getting out into the community, especially with United Way and all their partnering agencies, they are now coming to us with additional data sets of their own clients and services, asking us to help them map them out so they can help improve the programs that they have as well. It takes time to build those relationships. This was, I guess, maybe an advantage to us. If we were a new department, we were going out, beating the bushes, telling them who we were, what we did, that kind of thing. We built relationships with these guys because we were asking them for some pretty significant data at times, and getting it down to the address level, it made some of the folks a little bit nervous. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to share it? So develop those relationships, and before you present it to management or anybody else, take it back to them. Let them see it. Let them have it. It goes a long way. And then collaboration. Collaboration is the key. Including our office, you're looking at things a total of 15 different agencies or departments that we've worked with on this project and continue to work with, from social services and tax and housing, planning, inspections. And then the interesting ones, we have 3 different law enforcement agencies and 3 different fire agencies in our jurisdiction that we work with. And at times, those guys may be a little more sensitive about what are you going to do with the data? How are you going to share it? So again, building those relationships has been very key for us. And I'll leave you with this, leave you on a positive note, right? Again, our GIS champion, the county manager, GIS is the tool that allows us to gain a much deeper understanding of our community's challenges. It can serve as a dashboard to let us know how we're doing and as a testing site for potential solution. Data tells a story, and stories are imperative if we're going to build effective solutions across what seem to be almost impossible political and social boundaries. If used effectively, GIS can be the master storyteller. Not saying anything to you guys, but this means a lot. And this means a lot for us as an office and for an organization to have those in those management positions that get it and that understand it. And so we keep doing what we can to make them happy. So I'll take time for any questions now, and then there is my contact information as well. there's a number of things, and yeah, I'm sorry. She was asking what is typically in that red area, the most distressed area. Is it multifamily housing? Is it slumlord type things? And in the initial data when we put it together to show the management, we did do a breakout of the property ownership. The majority of it is single-family residential houses. This area was built, I think, in the most part, 30s, 40s or so. Is that right, Lynn? We've got one of our planners back here. So you've got the more of the functional obsolescence of the two-bedroom, one-bath house type thing. There are some apartment and some, the word just left me, but there are some apartment complexes, subsidized housing and things in this area. But by and large, again, if you look at the owner occupancy that we showed, the renter occupancy, 80%. We did do a match of where the physical address of the property and where the tax bill goes to see about this absentee ownership, and about 61% of the properties there are owned by an absentee owner, if you're doing that correlation. So we do have a few. The government, I say the government, the city of Winston, the housing authority, the city of Winston owns a couple hundred properties in there. There's a couple of schools in the area, which is presented another thing that we've looked at, and the relationship of this versus the test scores and things like that of some of the schools. Primarily single-family residential and single apartments. Yes, sir.
Is that up on Winston Road, I've been there a while. Is that considered a happy hills area?
No, this is more of an area to the east of 52, about 12th Street up to 25th or so, over towards Cleveland, Dunleavy, that area.
The original neighborhoods are in two different time periods. Do those boundaries stay the same always? So they'll stay that way?
Oh, the appraisal neighborhoods? I don't think so. I think those can change and divide over time. I wish I had an appraiser in here.
Those are often adjusted at future evaluation.
That's true, yeah. Thank you, Rich. I knew there's another tax tag in here, so. But yeah, typically they'll be held constant, at least through that revaluation process, but they may need to be adjusted, kind of like census tracts are at the time of the census, at the time of revaluation, they may need to be adjusted.
You mentioned that you were also working as a partner with the hospital and the school of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Are they doing any kind of studies to look at chronic disease such as diabetes and food islands and food deserts in that area?
Yeah,
Implement some corrective measures for that?
Yeah, we've got a lot of groups right now across Forsyth County that are doing a lot or are interested in anything that has to do with food deserts, access to food, access to healthcare. That's one of the things that we've had a little bit of a difficulty in managing, because we'll have a different group come to us and say, I want you to map out these food pantries. Here you go, here's the list. Well, no, we have the list from this group. No, that's not the right list. So we're kind of battling that and trying to come up with a comprehensive list of things. But yeah, the hospital, probably can't get into a whole lot of what we've done with them. But a lot of theirs is more of an education and outreach. And to some of us, it seemed to be a basic necessity, washing your hands, take your medication kind of thing.
Right.
Is there a need to put local clinics out there to relieve pressure off of the ER and that type of thing for your, what we consider basic health care like this?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, could you go back to the slide of your variables?
The initial ones?
Well, I guess because you had a lot of point data as well.
Those?
So I'm with the top county. I've done similar. I just did similar work to the previous speaker. We're kind of doing similar things what you're doing as well. But I really like the congruent variables where you have a lot more data. And so far, I've just used ACS survey data, and margin of error is pretty bad. Pretty bad data, and I've come to terms with it by always including coefficient variation on top of that data. But I guess when you speak to like if you didn't work prior to just ACS and how adding that to the practice.
No, we essentially for us, the census tracts are good, the block groups are good for certain things, but for us to really pinpoint, in our opinion, we need to get down to that street level, down to that address or that XY coordinate. And with so many of the variables that we had access to or that were given to us are already kept in that manner in a database or spreadsheet of some type, we said, let's go with that. Now we have overlays, you saw, we looked at some census information, just overlay it just to kind of see how it fits in and what correlation. We looked at the study from UNC Chapel Hill that you referred to, and if you look at that, you're going to see a lot of Forsyth County census tracts up in the top, unfortunately, for their term of distress. But we mainly focused with just the local address-specific data.
And how easy was it to, I mean, you already had all that in common variables, but I can see that some of that stuff being very sensitive. Because that's something that I might be interested in looking at, because I know we have that, some of that data. So it's something that now, there's a lot of attention, and I just started actively working.
Right, and it's going to, I'm sure how easy that access is going to depend on your jurisdiction. For us, it's not been too much of an issue. Again, we took the time to build the relationships, and with police in particular, the lady, our contact there, she keeps asking the questions, and she asks the right questions before she says yes, and they take it up to the chief and get their blessing and that kind of thing. And anything that we do, whether it's for them or using their data, before we present it to anybody else, we send it back to them and say, this is what we came up with, this is what we're looking at. And typically they say, it's fine, go with it. And then they in turn incorporate it into some of their projects as well. So for us, it's not been too difficult. The health data we were real excited to get, and now we've tried to go back and start getting additional data, and I think the state has kind of clamped down a little bit maybe on even how our local folks are able to access the data. And then even if they get it, they may not be able to give it to us to do anything. So we had this in for a year or so. We may not be able to continue, but I'm not sure how that's going to work out right now. But yes, sir. Anything else? All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Gee, so